That midnight scene on the edge of the bed, it doesn't just evaporate when the sun comes up. You carry that heavy, invisible friction into your entire day, completely unaware that your body's vascular system isn't broken, it is just structurally locked. The real tragedy is that millions of men over 40 are actively wasting thousands of dollars on expensive synthetic blue pills or generic multivitamin blends, trying to force a high-pressure hydraulic event through arteries that have completely lost their youthful flexibility. They treat the symptom, but they completely ignore the microscopic cellular engine that dictates how wide their blood vessels can actually open. If your endothelium cannot manufacture the exact gas needed to relax those tight arterial walls, your performance capacity stays at absolute zero. It's simple, unyielding physics. But what if the answer isn't a complex, dangerous chemical intervention? What if real human clinical trials have already isolated a singular botanical compound that restarts that exact gas production with near pharmaceutical speed? We need to talk about what actually happens inside your pelvic floor when you feed it the correct raw materials, because the standard medical system is never going to give you this map. Before we dissect the precise hour-by-hour mechanics of how this extract shifts your blood flow, let's lock in this community. Drop a comment right now with your city and where you're watching from. I check these responses every single day because knowing where you guys are tuning in from reminds me exactly who we are fighting for in this mission for male longevity. I am Dr. David Chen, and my entire career is dedicated to analyzing the complex intersection of male endocrinology, peripheral vascular health, and sustainable virility. I don't look at numbers on a basic clinic chart and call it a day. I look at the reality of how a man functions, how his energy responds, and whether his body is performing at its baseline power. And week after week, the exact same story plays out in my office. A man sits across from me, lowers his voice, and admits that his intimate life has completely stalled. He looks exhausted. He feels deeply insecure. He tells me he thinks his testosterone has completely dried up because he's getting older. But when we run a specialized vascular profile on his lower abdomen, we don't find a hormonal deficit. We find a severe functional blood flow restriction. His pipes are completely starved. And the generic advice he's been following from fitness influencers and rushed primary care doctors is actually making the stiffness worse. They tell you to just go run on a treadmill or cut out dietary fats to fix your circulation. But that is a completely unoptimized approach to male anatomy. General cardiovascular exercise increases your heart rate and pushes blood to your major muscle groups, your lungs, your quads, your glutes. It does absolutely nothing to target the highly sensitive, ultra-microscopic capillary beds inside your pelvic basin. Your heart can be in pristine condition, pumping fluid perfectly through your chest, while the specialized pathways required to initiate and hold an erection remain completely dry and unresponsive. Think about the basic physics of what we are asking your body to do. An erection is not just an emotional response. It is a violent, high-pressure hydraulic event. It requires your local blood vessels to instantly dilate, accommodating a sudden influx of blood volume that must expand the internal tissue by up to 8 times its resting size. If those specific microarteries are stiff, narrow, or unresponsive to neural signals, the fluid pressure cannot move forward. The plumbing system simply locks down. And as a man ages, the biological factory that manages this expansion doesn't just slow down, it experiences a catastrophic structural collapse. By the time you cross the threshold of age 45, your cellular production of the primary vasodilator in the human body drops by more than 50%. You are quite literally operating on a half-empty tank. You are asking a depleted, stiffened vascular grid to execute a high-demand mechanical process, and standard lifestyle adjustments cannot rebuild those cellular walls fast enough on their own. To understand how to reverse this, we have to look past the macro vessels and focus entirely on a single, hyper-fragile layer of tissue. It is called the endothelium. This is a continuous microscopic layer of specialized cells that lines the absolute interior wall of every single artery and capillary in your body. Think of the endothelium as the master control center for your entire circulatory pressure. It doesn't just sit there passively like a lining inside a coat. It actively monitors chemical changes in your blood, physical friction, and neurological inputs. The very microsecond your brain experiences a spark of arousal, it fires an electrical signal down your spinal cord. That signal terminates directly at the endothelial cells inside your pelvic region. In a young, healthy vascular system, those cells respond to that signal by instantly manufacturing a short-lived gas molecule, nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the absolute molecular key to your vitality. The moment it is released, it diffuses directly into the surrounding smooth muscle walls of your arteries. It forces those tight, clamped, highly restricted muscle bands to completely relax and widen. When those smooth muscles open up, the physical resistance to blood flow drops to zero. Blood rushes into the cavernous spaces of the corpora cavernosa at maximum velocity. As these chambers fill to capacity, they expand outward, physically compressing the exit veins against the outer rigid wall of the tissue. This creates a natural one-way trapdoor. The blood goes in under high pressure, the exit routes are completely blocked, and a solid, sustainable erection is maintained until the neurological signal turns off. But look at what happens when the endothelium is degraded. If your cells are starved, inflamed, or structurally stiffened by age, the electrical signal arrives from your brain, but the chemical response is dead. The endothelium cannot produce the necessary volume of nitric oxide gas. The smooth muscles around your pelvic arteries stay clamped, narrow, and entirely rigid. The blood flow cannot move past the entrance lines. You experience a total mechanical failure, even though your mental drive, your affection, and your desire are completely intact. This is where the massive delusion of popular prescription blue pills completely falls apart. Men assume these medications are creating blood flow from scratch. They don't. Those synthetic drugs are strictly phosphodiesterase type 5 inhibitors, or PDE5 inhibitors. Their only job is to slow down the natural breakdown of a chemical compound called cGMP, which is produced after nitric oxide has already done its work. Think about the sheer logic of this. If your endothelium is structurally compromised and isn't producing the initial nitric oxide spark to begin with, those expensive blue pills have absolutely nothing to amplify. You are placing a massive, high-powered megaphone directly in front of a completely silent whisper. Nothing happens. So you go back to the clinic, you complain it's not working, and your doctor simply doubles the dosage. Now you are flooding your systemic circulation with a massive chemical load, dealing with intense facial flushing, pounding headaches, nasal congestion, and dangerous visual distortions, while the actual health of your blood vessels continues to silently rot away behind the scenes. You are forcing a broken pump to try and push fluid through a permanently clamped hose. True, lasting restoration requires a complete shift in strategy. You have to bypass the synthetic blocks and go directly to the raw, cellular factory floor. You must introduce a specific organic compound that forces the endothelial cells to maximize their own natural production of nitric oxide gas, reopening the pathways from the inside out. And through decades of rigorous, peer-reviewed human clinical trials, researchers have isolated one singular botanical extract that achieves this microvascular expansion with near pharmaceutical velocity. We are not talking about the generic, unstandardized root powders or ground-up leaves you find on the discount shelves of your local grocery chain. Those products are a complete waste of your time and money. We are talking about a highly purified, molecularly standardized extract harvested from the bark of a very specific tree, the French maritime pine, clinically designated as pycnogenol. When you strip away the marketing fluff and look directly at the raw molecular architecture of this exact botanical extract, you find a highly dense, unique cluster of water-soluble organic compounds called proanthocyanidins. These specific polyphenolic molecules possess a radical, verified capacity to rewrite human hemodynamics within hours of entering your system. They do not function like a generic stimulant. They do not force your heart to beat at a dangerous rhythm, and they do not spike your systemic blood pressure to create artificial flow. Instead, the moment these proanthocyanidins hit your bloodstream, they migrate straight to the pelvic cavity and bind directly to the internal receptor sites of your endothelial cells. Once attached, they activate a critical genetic switch that upregulates an enzyme called eNOS, endothelial nitric oxide synthase. This specific enzyme is the literal protein factory inside your body that takes the raw amino acids circulating in your blood and rapidly converts them into active nitric oxide gas. By drastically boosting the speed and efficiency of this eNOS protein factory, the botanical extract forces your pelvic blood vessels to instantly regain their natural, youthful elasticity. Let's trace the exact hour-by-hour journey of what happens inside your lower abdomen when you introduce a precise therapeutic dose of this compound. Within the first 60 to 120 minutes after ingestion, the proanthocyanidins successfully clear your digestive tract and saturate your plasma. They automatically navigate to the areas of highest vascular resistance in your body. As they flood the microcapillary networks of the lower pelvis, they trigger a continuous, sustained release of nitric oxide gas along the smooth muscle walls of the smaller distal arteries. The structural tension inside those tight pelvic channels drops instantly. This means your heart doesn't have to work harder, contract with more violence, or push at a dangerous pressure to move fluid down into your lower extremities. The local channels are simply wide open, completely primed to accommodate a massive volume shift the exact microsecond your nervous system triggers the demand. In landmark clinical trials tracking men over 40 with documented microvascular blood flow insufficiency, the results were staggering. When researchers combined this standardized French maritime pine bark extract with a precise synergistic dose of the amino acid L-citrulline, they observed a near total restoration of natural erectile function within a 6 to 8 week period. The men in these studies didn't just report a temporary artificial patch. They experienced a profound, permanent return of spontaneous morning erections. And look, you need to understand the deep medical significance of that specific change. A morning erection is not a random event. It is the ultimate, non-negotiable barometer of a man's vascular youth and systemic health. During deep REM sleep, your brain automatically turns off the sympathetic nervous system and activates the parasympathetic loop, sending multiple prolonged surges of highly oxygenated blood directly into the pelvic tissues. This nightly diagnostic test is your body's built-in defense mechanism, designed to stretch the smooth muscles, oxygenate the tissues, and prevent the cellular architecture of the penis from forming scar tissue and losing its volume. When you lose your morning erections, your body is screaming at you that your baseline nitric oxide levels are too low to even trigger its own automatic maintenance cycles. Your pelvic tissue is literally suffocating in the dark every single night. By systematically revitalizing the eNOS enzyme factory through this specific botanical extraction, you turn that automatic restoration back on. You ensure that your blood vessels stay pliable, reactive, and highly oxygenated 24 hours a day, protecting your erectile tissue from premature, age-induced degeneration. But there is a massive catch to this, and it is something the supplement industry tries desperately to hide from you. If you walk away from this video right now and just order the cheapest pine bark bottle you find on an online marketplace, you are completely wasting your money. The overwhelming majority of commercial supplement brands use low-grade, completely unstandardized extractions scraped from random pine species. These cheap powders are loaded with synthetic fillers, possess zero biological availability, and contain almost none of the active proanthocyanidins required to stimulate the eNOS protein factory. Your aggressive stomach acid completely obliterates the delicate molecular structures before they can ever exit your liver and reach your vascular lining. To achieve pharmaceutical-level speed and genuine permanent arterial expansion, the extract must be strictly standardized to contain an absolute minimum of 65 to 70% active proanthocyanidins, and it cannot be treated as a temporary gimmick. It must be taken consistently every single day to allow the microscopic cellular walls of your blood vessels the necessary time to structurally adapt, clear out oxidative stress, and physically rebuild their natural flexibility. This isn't about popping a synthetic pill 30 minutes before you think intimacy might happen and praying for a temporary chemical miracle. This is about a systematic, disciplined daily repair of your internal biological engine. Okay, Para, take a step back for a second and look at why this information is completely omitted from the traditional healthcare system. When you go in for your standard annual physical, what actually happens? Your doctor wraps a manual cuff around your arm, takes your blood pressure, runs a generic lipid panel to look at your cholesterol, and spends maybe 7 minutes looking at a screen. If your numbers are creeping into a dangerous zone, or if you muster up the courage to lower your voice and admit that things aren't working right in the bedroom, they do not investigate your endothelial health. They don't run a test to check your cellular nitric oxide synthesis. They simply reach for a prescription pad and hand you a synthetic block to manage the symptom. Why? Because it is infinitely faster and easier for a crowded bureaucratic medical system to prescribe a lifelong chemical crutch than to sit down and teach a man how to restore the microvascular tone of his entire pelvic basin. They have trained an entire generation of men to passively accept a steady, degrading decline in their physical power as an unchangeable natural consequence of turning 40 or 50. They want you to accept a muted version of your life, relying on synthetic medications that create psychological dependence and long-term vascular resistance. But your body is not a static machine that was programmed by nature to just wither away and fall apart the exact moment you cross middle age. It is an incredibly adaptive, highly intelligent, fluid biological system that responds directly and immediately to the specific raw materials you feed its cellular pathways. When you stop suffocating your system with artificial compounds and introduce a highly potent, molecularly verified botanical extract that directly feeds the ENOS pathway, you are actively reversing years of silent, hidden vascular stiffness. You are giving your microarteries the exact tools they need to expand fully, restoring the precise internal pressure gradients necessary to lock blood flow inside the pelvic tissue when you actually need it. The physical shift cascades into your psychological reality almost instantly. Think about the massive, crushing mental weight you carry when your body becomes an unpredictable gamble. The absolute second intimacy becomes a remote possibility. Your brain doesn't enter a state of connection, pleasure, or relaxation. It instantly flips into a state of intense, analytical performance anxiety. You aren't present in the room. You are locked inside your own head like an anxious spectator, running a cold mental checklist, hyper-analyzing every single physical sensation, praying that the mechanics will cooperate this time. That intense psychological stress floods your entire bloodstream with massive spikes of cortisol and adrenaline. And adrenaline is nature's most powerful, immediate vasoconstrictor. It is the exact chemical your survival mechanism releases when it thinks a predator is chasing you, designed to violently clamp your peripheral blood vessels shut and pull all available blood volume away from your extremities and straight into your core vital organs to keep you alive in a crisis. So the literal fear of failing in the bedroom triggers a chemical flood that guarantees physical failure. The harder you try to mentally force the erection, the more adrenaline you produce, and the tighter your pelvic arteries clamp shut. It turns into a vicious, self-feeding psychological trap that completely obliterates your confidence and quietly erodes your relationship from the inside out. You begin to avoid simple, spontaneous physical touch altogether. You hesitate to hug your partner when you walk through the door. You stop holding their hand on the couch, and you create artificial distance because you are absolutely terrified that any minor sign of affection will escalate into a physical demand your body cannot execute. The unspoken resentment builds up in the bedroom. The emotional wall grows taller every single week, and you end up sleeping on the absolute edge of a completely silent mattress, both of you feeling utterly rejected, physically isolated, and deeply disconnected. Dismantling that psychological trap requires a clean, physical intervention that removes the mechanical doubt from your body. When you possess the absolute confidence that your microvascular pathways are wide open, highly elastic, and biologically primed for maximum blood flow, the mental static completely vanishes from your brain. You stop analyzing, you stop spectatoring, and you naturally return to a state of calm, unshakable, masculine confidence. Let's look at the broader, systemic context of this issue, because your pelvic blood flow is the single most accurate indicator of your long-term cardiovascular survival. The arteries that supply blood to your erectile tissue are incredibly small, measuring an absolute maximum of just 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter. The coronary arteries that supply blood to your heart are significantly larger, measuring roughly 3 to 4 millimeters in width. This means that a functional failure in your pelvic blood flow is almost never an isolated reproductive problem. It is statistically the very first warning sign of a systemic, full-body vascular decline. It is the definitive canary in your biological coal mine. If your endothelium is currently struggling to produce enough nitric oxide gas to expand those tiny, sensitive 1 millimeter channels, it is a mathematical certainty that your larger coronary and cerebral arteries are also losing their compliance and stiffening up behind the scenes. By targeting your endothelial health with a standardized, high-purity botanical extract, you are not just patching up a temporary frustration in the bedroom. You are actively protecting your entire cardiovascular grid. You are ensuring that your brain, your heart, your lungs, and your kidneys receive optimal oxygenation and continuous nutrient delivery, preventing the long-term arterial stiffness that leads to major, irreversible cardiovascular events down the road. This is true, personalized, high-performance medicine. It is about treating your body as an integrated, complex biological machine, where every single pathway, hormone, and blood vessel is deeply connected. I want you to look at your daily health routine tonight in a completely different way. Refuse to accept the lazy, outdated medical narrative that crossing 40 or 50 means you have to watch your physical power, your drive, and your connections slowly wither away into nothing. Your body possesses a radical, built-in capacity to heal, adapt, and restore its baseline power if you stop suffocating its cells with synthetic solutions and give its internal systems the precise biological tools they require. Tomorrow morning, instead of just downing a generic cup of coffee, ignoring your circulation, and hoping for the best, make a conscious, disciplined decision to systematically rebuild your endothelial engine. Explore the targeted use of verified, molecularly standardized French maritime pine bark extract alongside synergistic nitric oxide precursors like L-citrulline to naturally drive your vascular expansion to its absolute physical peak. Give your blood vessels the raw manufacturing materials they need to regain their natural elasticity, their youthful tone, and their responsiveness. You deserve a comprehensive health strategy that honors your entire masculinity, protecting your heart, unlocking your internal blood flow, and preserving the deep physical connection and raw confidence that define your life. If this kind of deeply researched, completely honest, and uncompromised breakdown of male biology is what you've been missing in your health journey, taking 2 seconds to hit subscribe ensures you'll never miss the crucial breakdowns we are delivering next week. Take absolute control of your biology, protect your heart, and restore your baseline power tonight.